It's February the 8th, 1945, and U-864 is on a top-secret mission, all the way to Japan. Inside the U-boat are the plans and technology needed to build Japanese Me-262s, V-2 rockets, and possibly even a nuclear weapon. To change the course of the war, U-864 must first reach Japan. Standing in the control room is Korvettenkapitän Ralf-Reimar Wolfram. It's only his second war patrol. U-864 is pushing through the sea when suddenly the crew are startled by a loud bang. The engines begin to thump and chug, and the whole submarine vibrates. Wolfram shouts into the intercom and demands an update. The engineer responds with terrible news. The air compressor has malfunctioned, damaging the diesel engines. Wolfram knows that he'll have to head back to port to fix them. Knowing enemy submarines could be waiting anywhere, Wolfram risks raising the attack periscope. He rotates it around looking for any signs of enemy ships. He does a full rotation and sees nothing. The attack scope allows him to scan the waves, but it's no use for checking the sky. He tells his crew to raise the surveillance scope. With its higher angle of view, the larger surveillance scope lets Wolfram check for enemy aircraft. Wolfram's focused on the skies, and he doesn't know that across the icy depths, the British submarine HMS Venturer is waiting to intercept. In the British control room, the submarine's second-in-command, Lieutenant Andrew Chalmers, arcs the periscope across the sea, straining his eyes to pick out anything unusual. Then, he spots it. Chalmers can't believe his luck. It's the bulky head of a surveillance scope. There are no Allied boats around here. Whoever he's looking at has to be the enemy. Chalmers turns to one of his sailors and sends him to wake the captain as a surge of adrenaline flows through the crew. Stepping into the control room comes Venturer's commander, Lieutenant James Stuart Launders. Chalmers guides his captain's eyes towards the enemy periscope and waits anxiously for his assessment. It has to be a U-boat. He orders Venturer closer and tells the crew to ready torpedoes. Everyone knows that no submerged submarine has ever sunk another submerged submarine. But in the bow of Venturer, sailors slam the heavy torpedo doors shut before the tubes fill with water. Venturer cuts through the depths, closing in on the German U-boat. On board U-864, her hydrophone operator gets a fix as the HMS Venturer's propellers cut through the sound of the U-boat's own engines. The operator warns the captain. Wolfram immediately orders evasive maneuvers. By changing course every few minutes, he should confuse the enemy and make it harder for them to hit his submarine. If he can just get back to the Norwegian coast, he should be safe. Wolfram's training is telling him to get out of trouble as fast as possible, but he's anxious to know more about the vessel that's chasing him. He raises the attack periscope once more and starts frantically scanning the surface of the waves. The U-boat's periscope continues to mark its position. All the while, HMS Venturer catches up on U-864.
Estimated range, 2,500 yards.
Launders takes another look through the periscope and can see by the angle of the enemy scope that the German submarine is zigzagging. That can only mean one thing. He's been spotted. Launders scowls as he thinks this through. Attacking a submerged enemy is no easy task, and attacking one that's zigzagging is even harder. But if he can shadow the enemy submarine, then he can compare its speed and heading with his own. HMS Venturer turns to starboard and silently starts to gain on U-864. Launders needs to get hold of accurate readings for a heading, speed, and the angle of zigzag. If he gets a visual reference, he can calculate a torpedo firing solution.
U-boat speed is about 3 knots. Hold on. U-boat just shifted course a few degrees.
By now, Launders is sure he's dealing with a young and inexperienced opponent. Maybe that gives him an opening. Just as he hoped, the German captain has still got his attack scope raised high above the waves. It's the last piece of the puzzle, a steady visual reference, which allows him to figure out the enemy submarine's bearing. Stopwatch in hand, Launders times every zig and every zag. Launders times every turn to calculate the U-boat's zigzag angle. His pencil scratches away on the chart. The crew watch their captain as he works. They're tense with anticipation. Every minute brings them closer to the clash.
I've got it.
He's worked out the U-boat's zigzag speed and course. The German captain is making 10-degree course zigzags.
He just zigged, sir.
Launders clicks a button on his stopwatch, and the second hand starts ticking across the ivory face.
Now we wait.
When the U-boat zags back to starboard, it should cross right in front of him. He needs to fire a spread of torpedoes at exactly the right moment. The minutes tick by, sweat dripping down Launders' brow. He looks at his stopwatch. It's time to attack. He sets his stopwatch to 15 seconds and gives the order.
Fire tube 1.
First torpedo bursts out of the tube, surging forwards into the sea. Launders clicks his stopwatch. Over on board U-864, the hydrophone operator picks up the sound of the launch.
Torpedo im Wasser!
Wolfram takes decisive action. The U-boat descends rapidly, its nose angling down and turning hard to the side. The crew hold on to railings and handles as the floor drops beneath them. The aggressive maneuver works, and the first torpedo slices through the water. The submarine shakes as the torpedo smashes into the rocks of a nearby island. On board Venturer, Launders looks down at his stopwatch and gives the word to fire off his next torpedo.
Fire tube 2.
The second torpedo goes hurtling through the water.
Einschlag!
U-864 continues diving, and just a second later, the torpedo races above their heads once more. Every torpedo launch helps the hydrophone operator to pinpoint the British submarine's location. Once he's completed his evasive turn, Wolfram will have 4 of his own torpedoes ready to send right back towards HMS Venturer.
Dritter Torpedo im Anmarsch!
The crew brace themselves as the submarine continues to dive down.
Wieder verfehlt!
Wolfram knows his enemy probably only has 4 torpedo tubes. One more dodge, and he'll be free to attack. Back on board Venturer, Launders prepares to fire his final torpedo. A bead of sweat drips down his brow. This is his last chance to score a direct hit before the enemy retaliates.
Fire tube 4.
The last torpedo launches from the tube, trailing its stream of bubbles.
Einschlag!
Weiter tauchen!
U-864 keeps pushing down into the sea, but it's no use. The final torpedo smashes into the U-boat, striking amidships and tearing the hull open to a violent onslaught of water. In seconds, the flooded midsection becomes so heavy that the hull gives way and the boat tears itself into 3 pieces. Wolfram and the crew don't even have time to process what's happened to them as U-864 is dragged down into the depths. On Venturer, the crew listen through the hydrophones as the crashing and gurgling slowly turns to silence. They've just completed a historical first, but no one on board wants to celebrate the deaths of 70 fellow sailors, even if they are the enemy. U-864's wreck settles on the bottom of the sea. Time passes, and the secret weapons it held rust and corrode. The poisonous chemicals they contain find their way into the sea, poisoning the marine environment. In 2018, more than 70 years after the U-boat crew met their watery grave, the Norwegian government started an operation to bury the U-boat in a sarcophagus of sand and rocks in an attempt to avert an environmental catastrophe. That operation still continues.
Click this link and watch the story of a U-boat that sank a passenger ship.